Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. Today, I'm talking about why CDs have made a huge comeback in 2025. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlists that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So streaming is still the big dominant force in music. It's how a majority of people listen to their music every day. And while vinyl records have been the main format for physical music for the last decade and a half, CDs have been slowly making a comeback over the last few years. I think the big main reason for that is just the cost of records these days. Yeah, and I don't want to, focus too much on pricing, but, records have gotten a lot more expensive over the last 6 to 8 years. I remember when I got back into buying records quite a few years ago now, I pick up a lot of new records for $20 to $24, and now those same albums are like 30 to 35 to even closer to $40. So when a new album comes out, your choices are either, spend $35 for the record or, $12 to $16 for the CD. And when people have less disposable income like they do right now, it's really hard to drop that much money on a record when you can pick up, 2 CDs for the same price. And CDs aren't immune to the price increases either. A few years ago, I was picking up new CDs for, I think the average was probably about $8 to $12, and now the average is more like $12 to $14 or $12 to $16. I'm even seeing a lot of new releases that are $18, $19, $20. But those higher prices, I think, are kind of the rare instances where, like I said, with vinyl records, I think the average price for new records now, you're in that $30 range. And other than the cost of records pushing people over to CDs, I think there's some other reasons why we're seeing an increase in CD sales. I think one big factor is the fact that a lot of kids born in the late 80s and early 90s who grew up with CDs, they didn't grow up with records. Now that they're in their 30s and a little more established in life, I think a lot of people are kind of going back to the nostalgia of their youth and starting to rebuild those CD collections that they had years ago. And yes, some of them did grow up listening to records also, but CDs were the main force in music in the 90s and early 2000s, so that's what a lot of those kids grew up listening to every day. And I'd be willing to bet that a lot of the growth we've seen in CD sales are coming from that 25 to 35-year-old demographic. I think another reason we're seeing an increase in CD sales is the fact that it just sounds so much better than streaming services. Yes, there is some high fidelity streaming out there. Apple Music is all lossless. You've got Tidal out there also, so you can get good quality streaming services. But Spotify is the major or the main streaming service available out there. And comparing it to a CD, Spotify sounds like hot garbage. And that might be a little hyperbolic, but if you're comparing Spotify to CDs, I have a Spotify account along with an Apple Music account. So I've done the A/B comparisons with what you're getting on their service, comparing that to the CD. And in most instances, Spotify has a kind of dull, lifeless sound to it. So I think as people are realizing that and rediscovering CDs, you're going to see them kind of get more and more into it. I also think people are rediscovering the fun of owning a physical copy of your music. There's a lot of albums out there that if you go on Spotify or if you go on Apple Music or Tidal, it's just like the standard version of that album, and you're only going to listen to whatever copy of that album they have available on their service. But, there's multiple different mixes or remasters that you can go out there and find on CD. So it's always kind of fun to figure out what is the best sounding version of that album, and you don't really get that with a streaming service. Over the last several years, we've seen artists and labels get in disagreements with streaming services and pull their music down. And having a copy of that on CD, you don't really have to worry about that. You own a physical copy of that regardless of what the streaming service does with it. And once you buy a CD, you own it forever. There's no monthly fees. There's no ads to worry about. You can just put that on and listen to it regardless of what's going on with the streaming service. And even though it's 2025, there are places in the US, I'm sure across the world, where internet service just is not good or reliable. So if you're in one of those areas or you're traveling through one of those areas, it's hard to listen to your streaming service if you have no internet connection. But CDs, they work everywhere all the time. So there's no concern with internet issues or signal loss. I think another reason we're seeing interest in CDs once again is the fact that it takes up a lot less space than a record collection. You know, if I've got about 1,500 albums in my collection, it takes up a lot of space in my office, where if you've got 1,500 CDs, it takes up just a fraction of that. So you don't need to dedicate huge areas in your house to your record collection for CD collection. And while CDs don't have the value of some records, you know, there still is a collectability to CDs. There are CDs that gain in value. There are limited edition CDs. There are the MoFi gold disc versions of albums that have a higher collectability and a higher overall value. So even though there's not as big of a collectability factor with CDs, it's still there. Even though it's probably not very popular and very few people do it nowadays, you know, putting a CD together, burning a CD for somebody, putting a bunch of random songs or putting a bunch of your favorite songs on a CD and gifting it to somebody is a lot cooler than saying, hey, I put this playlist together for you, go on Spotify and listen to it. I can't really speak on anywhere else, but here in my little part of Michigan, in southeastern Michigan, the used record market has been pretty dry for the last few years. I think fewer and fewer people are deciding to sell off their record collections. They're holding on to them, I think mainly because they're gaining in value. So I think they're going to one day be able to sell all those and retire off of it, which is not the case. You know, if you go to resell your record collection, you're going to get pennies on the dollar what you paid for them. But you can still go out there and find really good deals on used CDs. So where the used vinyl market is kind of dying off, the used CD market has really taken off. Album artwork and liner notes are all part of the physical experience of listening to music. You lose that with streaming. Yes, you know, you don't have the same experience with CDs as you do records, where the artwork is bigger, all the liner notes are bigger, but still having that booklet that's included with your CD is still a lot better than anything you're getting off a streaming service. And one of my favorite things to do with an album, whether it's on CD or on vinyl, is sit down and read over the liner notes, you know, who produced it, who engineered it, all the behind the scenes people that were involved in the creation of that album. And you don't get that really with any streaming service. So even though I don't think it's the same experience that you get with records, it's still a better overall experience that you're getting with streaming. Really, the only advantage that you're getting with any streaming service is just convenience. It's not a better overall experience. It's not better overall sound quality. It's just the fact that it's right there on your phone, regardless of where you're at. And there's also more of an intention of sitting down and listening to specific albums or artists compared to whatever the algorithm is going to feed you on Spotify or Apple Music. You're not just reliant on whatever an AI program says, this is what you're going to like, or these are artists that are similar to ones you've liked previously or listened to previously. You actually have to go out and figure out what you like and put on an entire album and sit down and listen to it from beginning to end. So overall, at least with me, I think it's more meaningful to listen to a physical copy of an album. And there's also a tech fatigue factor that I think plays into some of this also. People are just tired of being bombarded with technology nowadays. They're getting burned out on staring at screens all day long and being bombarded by digital platforms. So it's nice to detach from all of that and just toss on a CD. And comparing CDs to records, you know, records are still my preferred format of listening to music, but just comparing the two, CDs are a lot more durable than what you're ever going to get with a record. And as much as I love them, records degrade over time, and that's not the case at all with CDs. You can listen to a CD nonstop for decades on end, and it's not going to change from the first play to the last play. And there's also been times where I've pulled up Apple Music or Spotify and just kind of scrolled through, and just because of the amount of music that's on there, sometimes it's kind of hard to even figure out what you want to listen to. Maybe it's not always a good thing to have every song ever created at your fingertips. So while it's great to use a streaming service to discover new artists, having a more curated record collection or CD collection, to me, seems like a more intentional, or feels like more an intentional listening experience. I think you're seeing young generations get into listening to CDs because even though they grew up with streaming, they grew up with digital music, you know, their parents probably had CDs, there's probably CDs laying around their house, so there's more of a curiosity to them. I think one thing that really hurts CDs in 2025 is a lot of cars don't have CD players in them, and there's not a lot of companies out there that are investing money in advancing the technology. I mean, there might be some companies out there, but there's nothing on a large scale. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of this. What do you think are the big reasons why we're seeing an increase in CD sales in 2025? Because other than the price of records, I think there's a lot of underlying factors that are really pushing up CD sales. I think we're going to see an even bigger increase over the next few years. But let me know what you guys think. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.